Good evening, everyone. This is Mike Romali here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for May 13th, 2020, recorded around 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The National Hurricane Center has once again done some changes to the area of interest here in the Florida Straits and the Bahamas, with the 48-hour chance getting bumped up to a low 10% chance. And the 5-day chance remains to a 70%. An area of low pressure could develop into a subtropical or tropical system this weekend into early next week, and the next update is expected by 9 a.m. the 14th of May. It should say the 14th, but oh well, that's a graphical issue on my end. Taking a look here at the satellite, this is the IR satellite coming from tropicaltidbits.com, and we are starting to see that area that we were talking about start to come into better focus. This is the area that we're most kind of keen in on over the Florida Straits, just north of the Bahamas. We do notice that there's already some convection trying to fire in this broad area here, this broad area really of low pressure that's going to be developing. This is our old front that brought us some of the precipitation to the South Florida area and the Bahamas earlier last weekend. That is now well out of the picture, but there is still a ton of wind shear across this area, so you do notice that a lot of the thunderstorms are actually getting sheared apart like crazy. That is not allowing anything to congeal, but we do have an upper level low that's just parked off the screen that is moving due westernly, and what that's going to do is allow, as this traverses the area over the next few days, that is going to bring with it some lower wind shear values across this region and allow something to develop in the vicinity of the South Florida coast and the Bahamas, and we'll touch on that here in just a second when we take a look at the computer guidance. Taking a look here at the 5-day, this is the daily 5-kilometer sea surface temperature anomalies updated as of yesterday. It's always a day behind. This is the area of interest in the Bahamas that we are continuing to monitor. That is not the button that I really wanted. There we go. That is the area of interest that we're kind of looking in, and that is going to generally be above normal, about a half a degree to a degree Celsius above the long-term average. But if we take a look here, this is the CDAS method coming from tropicaltidbits.com, initialized as of 12Z or 7 o'clock in the morning this morning. We do notice that this area is only in fairly marginal conditions, about 25 to 26 degrees Celsius water. Remember, 26 degrees Celsius is the desired temperatures, ocean temperature for convection and really for tropical systems to actually survive and thrive in that environment. So we're just on the cusp of that being enough for us to develop a fully warm core system. And that's why we could see some subtropical components and likely to see subtropical components in this. What do I mean by subtropical? Well, it has some upper level, like mid-level cyclonic features, and it also has some lower level warm core tropical characteristics to it. And it's a mash, it's a hybrid of systems that is combined into one. Sometimes I would just wish to get rid of the confusion. They would call it just a tropical storm, but we are left with subtropical because it is a hybrid of two systems, and that's what we're likely going to be seeing developing across portions of the Bahamas and the southern Florida coastline later this weekend and through portions of early next week. Again, to reiterate, this is expected to be fairly minimal. This is not expected to bring extreme winds, not going to be a significant hurricane at all, likely will not even become a hurricane. At best, this will become probably a subtropical storm, and if it did, it would become Arthur. That's the first name of the year for the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. Another thing really kind of hindering development right now is the upper ocean heat content values. You notice as we go up in the scale and get into these yellows and greens, these are the higher upper ocean heat content values, and they are certainly nowhere near in the vicinity of where our system is going to develop. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not any upper ocean heat content. That just means there's not enough to register really on this scale. There's always some, but that warm water does not extend fairly deep in the into the water, and as such, as a storm upwells water, it's going to upwell cooler and cooler water. And that's going to be one of the things really significantly hindering this from transitioning into a true and tried full-on warm core tropical storm. It is likely going to have a lot of subtropical characteristics in that regards because it's going to be just upwelling a lot of the cooler water. So you're certainly going to see that reflected probably and the sea surface temperature anomalies and the actual sea surface temperatures once this thing develops and moves through that area. Taking a look at the vorticity, this is coming from the Central University of Wisconsin website, and we are taking a look at about 5,000 feet, the cyclonic spin in the atmosphere. That's what these greens really is. The further up the scale you go, the higher in intensity that cyclonic spin actually becomes. This is our area of interest that we're starting to watch across the Florida Straits and just north of Cuba and the southern Gulf of Mexico regions and north of the Yucatan Peninsula. What that's going to do over the next coming days is that's going to transition across the Florida Straits and just north of Cuba. And as it does so, that could bring some localized gusty winds to portions of the Florida Keys, South Florida, the Bahamas. That is going to bring some squally conditions, some squally weather, maybe some gusty winds, 30 miles an hour, 40 in some of the higher end squalls. You might see, 1, 2, maybe 3 inches of rain across the area. And what that's going to do is areas impacted, obviously you need the fresh water in portions of the Bahamas, but areas that were impacted by Hurricane Dorian, that could hinder some of the ongoing efforts to kind of clean up and rebuild. Obviously the rebuilding process is going to take a really long time. For the areas that were ravaged by Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas last year, that's going to take a really long time to actually recover from that. But for the most part, this is not expected to be a significant, any sort of significant system. Again, this could bring some squally conditions, but we're not expecting a full-fledged significant hurricane or even a hurricane at all. Taking a look here at the GFS, this is the 18Z run valid as of 1 o'clock this afternoon on May the 13th. We will skip out here to about 48 hours from now, and we do notice that this area of vorticity here across portions of the Bahamas and the southern Florida area is trying to get its act together. By 72 hours, this thing is fully a subtropical type component of storm, and you do notice that it does have somewhat of that little S shape here, that classical tropical cyclone, tropical storm symbol. But do notice that the isobars, that's the lines of equal pressure rather, are pretty large. They're not really compact, they're not tight. What we would like to see for a fully tropical storm, we would like to see that more tight and compact. The tighter the gradients, the better the wind field, the tighter the wind field gets, and the stronger the winds actually get. And that's going to be one of the main problems. But we're also watching another kind of complicating factor here. We have this ridge of high pressure which has been dominating the southeastern United States really over the past couple of days, and that is expected to weaken down with the development of this low pressure system and abate more towards the east. What's also going to happen is we're going to have a trough of low pressure digging here across the Midwestern states with a secondary cutoff low developing over Texas and Louisiana, moving due easternly. That's also going to try to catch up what could be Arthur, more than likely, into its area of existence and push it further off towards the north and east. Just how far north and east this gets before some sort of weird interaction between the two that might occur, if any, is going to be the real determinant on any direct land impacts. Again, this is more than likely going to be a storm that goes out to sea, but we cannot rule out just anything quite yet. Again, nothing's 100% until it's happening in real time. I'd say 84 hours, this is just north of the Bahamas pulling away. But again, if we just skip out here, it's about 120 hours. This is passing between Bermuda and Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, north of Rodanthe. What's going to happen here is you notice that this is our big expansive upper level system with sort of this little cutoff flow across portions of Louisiana and Mississippi. What interaction is going to occur between this trough here that's moving out this way and this area of low pressure, which will likely be Arthur at this time? That interaction is going to be remaining to be seen. Again, we're not going to go past the 120 hours here. That's more than 5 days out, but the general sense still applies that there still could be some potential for what could be some weird sort of development occurring past 5 days, but for the general sense that it's just going to bring a ton of rain to portions of the Bahamas, or some rain to the Bahamas rather, If we take a look here at the GFS, this is just running it out to about 120 hours through the next 5 days. This is valid through Monday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You do notice that most of the more significant rainfall totals will be right along the Florida coast as expected. It rapidly drops off once you get further inland, and especially if you get up to about Central Florida, the Orlando area, generally I-4 and I-75 to about Tampa, you're not really looking at much in the way of precipitation. Our bullseye here seems to be about 5 inches, probably near Hollywood, Florida, but again, where exactly and if that actually pans out is still yet to be determined. We go take a look here at the European model. This is the European high-resolution model. We'll just send that out to about 72 hours. We do notice that development of the system is actually a little bit further off towards the east with this, and it's not as close to Florida, although we do still see this area of extended high or low pressure in this large expansive area that could bring some rain and some isolated convection to portions of Florida and the Bahamas. Again, setting up more of a rainfall potential, if anything, for portions across those areas. And again, what we're really just focused on during the next about 48 hours is exactly where does the center kind of get established. Again, we will likely see this be designated Invest 90L probably later tonight or during the day tomorrow. We will likely see a designation on that since we are closing in on time. I'd not be surprised if we do go ahead and get that tonight. But once again, this is going to be something that we're really going to have to keep in mind is where exactly in this area does it develop, with the European sort of been caving over to the GFS over the past couple of days. We've seen the Euro kind of flip and flop between where this thing wants to develop. But generally, for the most part, the European model has actually flopped a little bit to the GFS model and kind of followed in the GFS's footsteps and bringing us a little bit further towards the west and a little bit further towards the coastline. And certainly we've seen that reflected in the trends. And again, at this hour, trends are still our best friend. So we're still watching those trends and still really watching what's going to happen. One also, on a real quick note, one major threat to the storm that's going to be detrimental to really having the storm go off in an environment like this is going to be the wind shear. Again, we're still getting about 70 knots of wind shear across this area, preventing any sort of consolidation at this point. But if we do just look off screen where you see these 25s and eventually this 20 knot of wind shear area, there's an upper level low sitting across here that will be retrograding back out towards the west over the next coming days. This will bring the lower wind shear values. You do notice about 30 to 40 knots across this area, just ahead of that where that area is, that upper level low is. This upper level low will continue to drift off towards the west here over the coming days and bring conditionally lower wind shear across this area, but still expecting to probably remain within about 30 to about 20 to 30 knots of wind shear. So we're just finding near that neutral to pretty unfavorable type environment across that area. So again, the bottom line right now is that we have an area of interest that will be designated Invest 90L. This area is likely to go on to become a subtropical depression or storm. If it does become a subtropical or tropical storm, this next system will actually be Arthur as it begins to develop. And again, we're just mainly kind of keeping an eye on that. Again, if any impacts, this will bring some potential impacts as far as rain to portions of the South Florida coast and the Key West area, and also through portions of the Bahamas. This could bring some rain, but generally we are not expecting much than some rain, some squally conditions, and some gusty winds. Again, that's going to be it from me tonight. I will be back with another video update tomorrow morning. Hope you all have a safe evening, and I will see you tomorrow morning.